What's up, everybody? It's time for another primary source walkthrough. And this time, we have the man, the myth, the legend, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, president, elected to 4 consecutive terms. This is before the 22nd Amendment goes into effect. Presidents can't serve that long anymore, which is a good thing, I think, generally speaking. Anyway, enough about that. What we have here is we have Roosevelt talking to the Democratic National Convention in 1936, the same year that Herbert Hoover was speaking to the Republican National Convention. So what we get here is we get the rhetoric that both the Republicans and the Democrats were using in response to the New Deal in the next election after Roosevelt's first term in office. So Roosevelt at this point has had, the better part of 4 years to enact the New Deal and has done some really kind of tremendous stuff, which you read about in the textbook. And so here he is in 1936 running for the presidency of the United States again, and he is going to defend the New Deal by hook or by crook. It's his political legacy. And honestly, when we think about FDR, probably the first thing we think about FDR is the New Deal. Though I think if you know your history really well, thinking about Japanese internment is probably another immediate thing you think about when you think about FDR. And if you don't know about Japanese internment yet, stay tuned for next week, and we're going to talk about Japanese internment. We have to. In any case, that's next week. Let's talk about this week. So, he's going to do a lot in this speech. And like I said in the introductory video and in Herbert Hoover's primary source walkthrough, the New Deal is a complete reimagining of the United States, its government, and its government's relationship to the people. And if you look at in the introduction, which is this paragraph right here, that this part that I've underlined, what Foner tells us is he says that throughout the 1930s, he, FDR, consistently linked freedom with economic security and identified economic inequality as freedom's greatest enemy, its greatest enemy. And I want you to think about that for a minute. So if we have Jefferson's trio, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, Jefferson, I don't think, would have followed FDR on this one, for sure. And certainly the founding fathers, based on their actions, their beliefs, the way they lived their lives, generally speaking, did not care for the general welfare of the people beyond their abilities to be free. There's no... I mean, look at what the Constitution does in its first iteration and the rights that it promises. There's nothing about preventing economic inequality or anything about really economics in relationship to freedom, besides the fact that men should be unencumbered from too much interference, those sorts of things. This is something we talk a lot about in 1301. So what FDR is doing is he's saying, look, we have to reimagine this. This is no longer 1780. We live in the stark reality of 1936. We are in the midst of the greatest economic depression that the world has known. He's saying this in 1936. We'll see what happens to our world economy in the wake of COVID-19. But that's history as it's unfolding. Anyway, so with that in mind, let's take that as our point of departure And I think it's right that we kind of go back to the founding fathers in the introduction to this primary source, because that's exactly what FDR is going to do himself. So he starts and he immediately acknowledges where he is. He's in Philadelphia. And why is that so significant? Well, it is in Philadelphia that the Second Continental Congress happened. Okay? That's where we declared our independence from Britain. It's also where, in 1787, the Constitution was drafted and signed. So he's drawing a specific parallel to the American Revolution here. He's putting himself in the same light. That's fascinating. So here he says, look, in 1776, we sought freedom from the tyranny of a political autocracy. From 18th century royalists. We freed ourselves from the tyranny of monarchy. Okay? They denied us free assembly, free speech. They restricted the worship of God. Well, not really, but don't let that get in the way of a good speech. Okay, they put average man's property and the average man's life to pawn in the mercenaries of dynastic power. And we won that revolution. But now, here in the 1930s, and the 1920s, the 1910s, etc., we have a new problem. And that problem was of our own making. Look, our inventive genius, what did it get for us? Machinery, railroad, steam, electricity, the telegraph, the radio, all of this great technological advancements. But with technological advancements comes issues that you hadn't thought about before because you didn't even know to think about it. Think about somebody who grew up, who was your age, like 20 years old, let's say, in 1970. Could you imagine going back in time and asking them, well, what do we do about political neutrality on social media network sites on the internet? They would look at you like, what the hell are you talking about? I want to listen to Led Zeppelin and stuff. What's a social media network? What's the internet? They wouldn't know how to answer your question. That's kind of the same thing here. What FDR is saying, he's like, look, the founding fathers didn't know about industrialization. They didn't know about steam power and, harnessing electricity and mass production. That's not what they were about. And so what he's saying is, out of that new set of technology, we have these new problems, and it's not monarchists, but economic royalists. These big businessmen like Andrew Carnegie and Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan Chase and all of these other dudes who have really taken over. He's really pushing back against the Gilded Age here. And look, here's what he says. There was no place among this royalty, these new economic giants, for our many thousands of small businessmen and merchants who sought to make a worthy use of the American system of initiative and profit. What he's saying is that these new billionaires, millionaires, billionaires, these giant captains of industry have set themselves up as the royalty of the United States. And he's even going to dig at Carnegie a little bit here. Look what he says. They were no more free than the worker or the farmer. Even honest and progressive-minded men of wealth, aware of their obligation to their generation, could never know just where they fitted into this dynastic scheme of things. It's like, look, yeah, Carnegie was a pretty, stand-up dude in terms of his generosity and donating his money, but he didn't realize that he was setting things up for others to take advantage. He calls them despots. Okay, they're like dictators. And it's all, this is a problem. And for everybody else, the working men and women, they had terrible lives. Hey, they had their lives and their freedom impinged by these new industrial dictatorships. No one could get past where they were because these giant aristocrats, really, were holding them down. So, he redefines what liberty means here. Liberty, liberty requires the opportunity to make a living. Okay, so not are you getting paid for your work, but are you getting paid enough for your labor to actually support your life? Remember, this is still a time where there's not really a minimum wage. Hey, not like we have now. That's going to change. I think that's right. I can't remember what year the minimum wage came in. But, I mean, we're still, if you think about the Gilded Age, we're talking about people who are making like $1 or $2 an hour. Or $1 or $2 a week. And things like child labor, stuff like that. So, regardless, maybe that's what FDR is railing about here. So, in this, he goes further. A living which gives man not only enough to live by, but something to live for. So not just enough money to just get by, to live paycheck to paycheck, but, something that he can be proud of, a life that he or she can really hang their hat on. So now, because of this economic inequality, which he says leads to political inequality, essentially, it's like we're no longer free. Liberty is no longer real. Men can no longer follow their pursuit of happiness. So what he's saying, essentially, is that because of economic inequality, the promise of the Declaration of Independence and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness cannot be achieved. The collapse of 1929, he says, showed us exactly what this economic despotism was. Okay? These rich guys, they didn't hurt the same way that the average person did. And so in 1932, the average person stood up and elected me. We have now overthrown the monarchy of the 20th century. Okay? If we overthrew the royalists of Britain in our revolution, now here with the New Deal, we are overthrowing the dictators of this new American reality. What a powerful, powerful image. I mean, this is good politics. He's reimagining America, but he's bringing more people to the table. I think that's a really powerful message. Now, if you think back to Herbert Hoover and think that that's not a powerful message, I mean, think about these rich dudes like Carnegie and Chase and Rockefeller and, whatever. They're going to hear what Herbert Hoover has to say and be like, you know what? Herbert Hoover's right. That seems like it's more in my self-interest. It's not always true, like there are rich people now who vote for more liberal causes. So, you've got guys like Warren Buffett, Bill Gates. I don't know how Jeff Bezos is going to vote. But, I mean, Jeff Bezos is the richest man, and good God, that man has so much money. If you don't know who Jeff Bezos is, he's the guy who owns Amazon. He's got a ridiculous amount of money. In any case, so, what this is it's a statement against oligarchy. So oligarchy, as I note here, is just it's a small group of people who have control. And what FDR is saying is that these captains of industry have become the American oligarchs. And what we're doing with the New Deal is that we are overthrowing that system and we are taking control of this country for ourselves. So, as you think about this source, I mean, these are really interesting questions that Foner has us consider. How Roosevelt is defining economic freedom. I think we've been through that pretty well. And does Roosevelt see the federal government as freedom's enemy or ally? I think you can come up with an answer to that pretty easily. And I really want you to think about just how different FDR and Hoover are in terms of their ideas of freedom and liberty. And it's no wonder that Foner has these two documents paired. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. These two sources, FDR and Hoover, need to be read together. That's why you have 5 this week instead of 4. If you're going to understand the contest over the New Deal, you got to read both perspectives. So let's wrap it up there. We'll be back with some more thoughts on the New Deal soon. And until then, folks, take care, be good to yourselves, and I'll see you on the next one.